The tray of sugar cookies was still warm. I had placed it on the table right in front of them. Golden brown, soft center, my mother's old recipe. Nobody touched them. My granddaughter held up the family tree she made for school. Her little finger pointed at each name. This is my great-grandpa. This is Uncle Greg. Her voice trailed off. I leaned forward, curious. She skipped a branch, then smiled like nothing happened. I looked again. My name was not there. I searched for it. First name, middle name, maybe married name. Nothing. Elaine, my daughter, just laughed. Mom, it's just for school. Plus it's based on Daniel's side. Her husband's family. Don't worry, you're in our hearts. She said it like a joke. Like an afterthought. I looked down at my hands. Still holding the tray. Still warm. No one made eye contact. No one said thank you. The cookies sat there like they were invisible. Like me, I did not cry. I did not scold. But something in me cracked. Like a root torn from earth. It was not rage. Not sorrow either. Just a quiet, hollow, like when the last note of a hymn fades from the church walls. And no one notices. All my life I was the keeper of stories. The one who wrote names in margins. Who remembered who came from where. I lit candles every Christmas Eve. Kept recipes in a tin box older than my daughter. Held photo albums like prayer books. But that day, I realized memory is not inherited. It's either chosen or erased. And I had been erased. I helped raise them. I gave up birthdays, nights out, paychecks. But I was not on the tree. No roots. No branch. Just air. So I stood up. Picked up the tray. Wrapped the cookies no one touched. And left. The wind outside was colder than I remembered. The sky that evening was the kind of pale blue that makes your chest ache. I walked to the car slowly. Keys cold in my hand. Not angry. Just tired. Back to the cabin in the hills. Where my name still echoed between the wooden walls. Where a Bible with a cracked spine still held every birth, every death, every hope written by hand. If I was no longer part of their tree, then I would plant my own. And this time, no one could erase me. The house was quiet when I returned. Not the kind of quiet that soothes you. The kind that listens. I turned on the old radio. Static first. Then came the soft hum of a gospel choir. It filled the space like memory. I slipped off my shoes. The floor creaked beneath me. Same floor I used to sweep barefoot when Elaine was little. She would twirl in her socks down the hallway. Now, she barely called. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon and old wood. I set the cookies down untouched. They looked out of place even here. I sat at the small table by the window. Same table where I once wrote lesson plans, folded bills, and mended seams. I looked around. The same lace curtains from 30 years ago. The faded wallpaper peeling at the corner. The tin recipe box on the shelf. Still there. Still Mina. I reached for it. The metal was cool to the touch. I opened the lid slowly. Inside Grandma Ruby's peach cobbler. Aunt Myrna's spice cake. My own sugar cookies copied by hand on yellowed index cards. Each recipe had a name. Each name had a memory. And each memory had a woman behind it. But their names weren't on that tree either. I sat back. My fingers traced the ink that had started to fade. Some letters blurred by time or maybe by tears. I don't know when I started crying. The kind of crying that doesn't make sound. Just warmth on your cheek and something tight in your throat. I wasn't crying for myself. I was crying for them. For all the women whose names were written small. Whose lives were measured in meals and mittens and second shifts. Women who held families together. And still disappeared from the records. Like breath on glass. I closed the tin box gently. Set it back on the shelf. No one would come looking for it. But it would stay. Because sometimes, legacy is not about who remembers you. It's about what refuses to be forgotten. I poured myself a cup of tea. Chamomile and clove. The steam rose into the quiet. And I whispered a name. My mother's. Then my grandmother's. Then my own. Dorothy. Dorothy Blackwell. Not forgotten. Not gone. Still here. Still growing. The next morning I stepped outside with my tea. The woods behind the house were still wet from last night's rain. Everything smelled like pine and soft earth. I stood on the porch and listened. Birdsong. A squirrel rustling through leaves. The distant hum of someone chopping wood. This land used to belong to my great-aunt Margaret. She raised me after my mother passed. People in town called her stern. But to me she was steady. She taught me how to boil a chicken without a recipe. How to name the trees just by their bark. How to listen to the wind before planting anything. She never married. Never left this mountain. But somehow, she passed more on to me than any classroom ever did. I inherited this cabin from her. No one wanted it back then. Too far from town. Too old. Too full of ghosts, they said. But to me it was sanctuary. The walls creaked with stories. The drawers still stuck in the same places. Every time I open the pantry, I hear her voice reminding me to keep the sugar dry. Sometimes, when the light hits the kitchen tiles just right, I see her shadow. Not haunting. Just remembering. I walked down the steps barefoot, felt the damp wood under my soles. Picked a few mint leaves from the garden. They were small this year. But stubborn. That's how women in our line have always been. Not flashy. Just faithful. I thought about Elaine. About how she never brought Millie up here anymore. She used to when Millie was small. The child loved the woods. Would follow the butterflies like they had secrets to tell her. Now her hands only touch glass. Phones. Tablets. Screens. She scrolls through pictures of people she'll never meet, while forgetting the ones who held her. It isn't her fault. The world doesn't teach children to honor roots anymore. It teaches them to upload. Delete. Move on. But I still believe in staying. I believe in old cupboards and paper journals and soup from scratch. Not because I'm stuck in the past. But because some things are worth preserving. I sat on the bench near the rose bush. It bloomed late this year. Petals the color of candle wax. I remembered planting it with my husband 40 years ago. He's been gone half that time now. But the rose still returns. Quiet. Reliably. Like memory. Like me. That afternoon, I opened the old photo album. The leather cover had cracked at the corners. Its spine made a soft sigh when I laid it flat. I ran my fingers over the first page. A faded black and white of my mother. Hairpin tight apron tied just right standing beside a garden full of corn. She was 19. Pregnant with me. The note under the photo read, Spring planting. 1946. Her handwriting curved gently like her voice when she hummed in the kitchen. I turned the pages slowly. Each one carried a world. My father's army photo. Aunt Margaret holding a fishing rod twice her size. Me barefoot on the porch steps cradling a kitten. Then came Elaine. Red hair like fire in the sunlight. Cheeks full of wind from running too fast down the hill. She used to call the camera the memory catcher. But somewhere along the way, she stopped looking backward. The album grew thinner as the years passed. Less ink. Fewer names. The last photo was of Millie. 5 years old. Sitting in my lap with cookie dough on her chin. We had baked for hours that day. She had insisted on adding sprinkles even though I said no. She added them anyway, and I let her. She had looked up at me eyes wide and said, "This is a real recipe now, because it has my idea in it." I closed the album slowly. The room felt heavier. Or maybe I did. It is a strange ache, this kind of forgetting. Not loud. Not cruel. Just quiet absence. Like someone lowering the volume on your life, notch by notch, until all you hear is the clink of your own teacup. I stared at the box of recipes again, and then at the photo of Millie, still taped to the fridge. Her smile was crooked, unfiltered, real. She used to belong to this house. Before she belonged to school charts and phone screens and other people's expectations. I wondered if she remembered that day with the sprinkles. Or if that too had faded. Outside the wind picked up. It rattled the loose pane in the back window. I stood, reached for a shawl and wrapped it around my shoulders. Wool. Heavy. Faint smell of cedar. My husband's old one. Still warm. Still familiar. Still here. Just like me. The invitation came in the mail. A smooth ivory envelope thick like wedding stock. I thought it might be something special. Something thoughtful. It was a holiday card. From Elaine. With love, it said. But it was not addressed to me. It was addressed to all grandparents. Typed. No handwritten note. No signature. Just a printed message and a photo. A family portrait in matching red sweaters. They were standing in front of a fireplace I had never seen. Some cabin they rented for Christmas, apparently. Elaine, Daniel, Millie. Even his parents. Everyone smiling. Everyone there. Except me. I looked at the envelope again. Not even my name. Not even Mom. The photo slipped from my hand onto the floor. Face down. I did not pick it up. The next day, I got a call from Helen down the street. I saw Elaine's holiday pictures online. Looked beautiful, you must have had a lovely time. I paused. Felt my throat tighten. I didn't go this year, I said softly. Oh. I thought surely. Well, she stammered. I'm sure they meant to include you. I told her it was fine. Because it was easier than explaining the silence. Easier than describing what it feels like to be air. To be the pause between sentences. That week I baked the same gingerbread men Millie used to love. Put little scarves on each one with red icing. Set them in a tin. Wrapped it with a ribbon. I never mailed it. I left the tin on the counter for 3 days. Then ate one. It was dry. The second was better. The third made me cry. Not because of the taste, but because I remembered her tiny fingers stealing one before they cooled. Too hot, I used to warn her. She never listened. She was bold back then. Now, she barely looks me in the eye. I do not blame her. She is growing up in a world that edits fast. Deletes easily. But I still mourn the girl who danced in my kitchen with frosting on her nose. I still see her sometimes. In dreams. In shadows. In the last cookie I could not bring myself to eat. The one with the scarf shaped like a question mark. I left it on the counter. Alone. Like me. Sunday came and went without a call. No one asked how I was. No one remembered it was my birthday. 78. I did not tell a soul. I made myself oatmeal with raisins. Saturday on the porch with a blanket across my lap. The sky was pale and tired like a sheet left out in the sun too long. I watched a squirrel bury something beneath the rose bush. Even it remembered to prepare for the future. I just sat there, remembering. The year Elaine surprised me with breakfast in bed. The year Millie made me a card with glitter and crooked hearts. Gone now. Buried like winter roots. Around noon, I checked my phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No texts. No reminders. I opened my drawer and pulled out the old birthday cards I kept. From years past. I ran my finger over the ink. Some had smudged. One still smelled faintly of lavender. I read them again, even though I already knew the words. It was like holding someone's voice in your hands. And realizing they no longer speak it. By evening, I had set the table for one. A slice of apple pie from the freezer, warmed in the oven. A candle just for softness. I poured a small glass of wine. And whispered, "Happy birthday, Dorothy." No one clapped. But the flame flickered kindly. It danced like it heard me. I raised my glass. Not to celebration. To survival. To still being here. Even when no one noticed. Even when they moved on without me. The pie was too sweet. The crust too soft. But I ate every bite. Because even the smallest ceremony deserves to be witnessed. Even if the witness is yourself. Afterward, I turned on the radio. It played a hymn I hadn't heard in decades. The kind they used to sing at baptisms and funerals. I closed my eyes. Let the voices carry me. Not back to the past. Just somewhere warm. Somewhere full. I imagined a table where every chair had a name. Where every cookie got eaten. Where every root had space to grow. I opened my eyes slowly. The candle had burned halfway. The pie plate was empty. And I was still here. Still breathing. Still enough. A week later, Millie posted a video online. A school project. She was talking about family traditions. Every year, she said we bake cookies with Grandma June Daniel's mom. I watched her smile through the screen. She showed a pan of sugar cookies. Round. Plain. From a box mix. She called them our secret family recipe. I sat back. Felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not surprise. Just. That same quiet hollow again. The kind that comes when the page turns without your name on it. I remembered the first time I let her measure flour by herself. The way she spilled it all over the floor. She had looked up, covered in white dust, and giggled. I made snow. And I had laughed so hard I nearly dropped the mixing bowl. I still had the photo from that day. Framed. On my bookshelf. But Millie did not mention it. Did not show it. Did not seem to remember it existed. It felt like a chapter had been torn out. And replaced with someone else's handwriting. I tried not to take it personal. Tried to remind myself she's young. She's learning. But memory matters. Names matter. Recipes matter. Not because they're perfect, but because they carry people. Souls. Mothers. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. The house was still. A bird hit the window and flew off again. The wind brushed against the walls like it was looking for something. Maybe I was too. That night I pulled down the quilt from the top shelf. The one Millie used to nap under. I held it close. It smelled like cedar and old cotton, like something lost. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Older now. Lines like riverbeds across my face, but my eyes still steady. Still searching, I thought about what it meant to vanish while still living. To be edited out while your heart keeps beating. I would not shout. I would not beg, but I would not disappear quietly either. There were stories still inside me, roots still waiting to be named. And if no one else would tend them, I would. My hands might tremble, my voice might shake. But I still knew how to plant, how to grow, how to remember, and how to begin again. Elaine stopped by that Thursday, unannounced. She brought a box of takeout and a list of things to clean out. "Let's make space," she said, her voice light. "You don't need half this stuff." I nodded slowly, watched her set down the food like we were having a picnic. But her eyes were scanning the room, like a realtor. She opened the pantry first, pulled out tins, jars, boxes. "What's this?" she asked, holding up the recipe tin. Her fingers brushed off the dust without care. "My mother's recipes," I said. "And hers before her." Elaine squinted at the handwriting. "Mom, these are barely legible." She opened one card, read aloud. "Add a pinch of nutmeg. Trust your gut." "That's not a recipe, that's a riddle." She laughed. I didn't. She placed the tin in the donate pile. I reached over. Quiet but firm. "That stays." Elina sighed. "Mom, no one uses index cards anymore." "I do," I said. Silence fell. She moved on, opened the drawer under the radio, pulled out old photo envelopes, birthday cards, letters from cousins long past. She held them up. "These too?" "No," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it didn't bend either. She set them down with a little too much force. The radio clicked on by accident. Static filled the room. I leaned over and turned the knob gently. Found the gospel station. A voice sang low and sure about holding on. Elaine rolled her eyes. "Mom, you could digitize all this. Put it in a cloud." I looked at her then. She didn't mean to be cruel. She truly believed she was helping, but help can feel like erasure when it comes without asking. "These aren't clutter," I said. "They're names. They're women. They're how I know where I come from." Elaine folded her arms. "And where does all that take you now?" I didn't answer. She meant it as a question. But it felt like a verdict. The wind knocked gently on the window. The photo on the fridge fluttered. Millie's crooked smile looked back at me. I stood up, took the recipe tin from the pile, held it like something sacred, because it was. Elaine didn't say another word. She packed up the rest quietly, left the takeout in the fridge, and drove away without hugging me. The next morning, I walked into the living room. The space felt disturbed, like something holy had been touched without reverence. The donate pile still sat near the door. 3 cookbooks, a framed embroidery, a stack of letters tied with red string. Elaine hadn't taken them. She had left the pile for me to finish. As if she knew I wouldn't. I stood there staring at it. The frame on top held a cross-stitch I made at 21. Bless this home and all who enter. I remembered stitching it during the long evenings after Elaine was born, with candlelight and a newborn asleep beside me. That thread had carried my hopes. Now it sat in a pile of discardables. The letters on top were from my mother, written in slanted cursive. Ink faded but still proud. She had written about hard winters, about saving bacon grease in jars, about how love sometimes looked like ironing his shirts without asking. I untied the string slowly. Read one line aloud. Dorothy, always keep something warm on the stove, even if no one's coming. My breath caught. I held the page to my chest. The paper smelled faintly of old ink and lavender drawer liner. Memories live in scent, in softness, not in spreadsheets or digital folders. I sat down on the edge of the couch, letters in my lap. My hands trembled not from age, but from restraint. I wanted to scream. To ask Elaine when she stopped valuing the things that made her. But what good would that do? She thought efficiency was kindness. She believed in decluttering emotions like closets. I picked up the embroidery. The glass was cracked at the corner. Maybe from her bag. Maybe from neglect. Either way, it matched how I felt. I looked around the room. Framed photos. Books with dog-eared pages. A chipped mug with my husband's initials. Not junk. Not junk. Not junk. Each piece held a breath of someone I loved. Each thread, each crease, each fold in paper, proof that I had lived, remembered, cared. I could not throw them away. Not for space. Not for anyone's approval. I stood and moved the pile to my bedroom, laid each item carefully into a cedar chest. One by one, gently. With thanks. Then I closed the lid. Like sealing a sacred promise. Not for the world. For me. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same spot. Same wood grain worn by years of elbows and teacups. I had lit a single candle. The flame flickered softly, catching the edge of the recipe tin. The lid was closed. But inside, I could feel every name. Every hand that once stirred with love. I thought about throwing it all away. Just to make Elaine happy. To show I could move on. But then I looked down at the table. At the scratches. The faint ring where my husband used to set his coffee cup. The spot where Millie once spilled blue paint, making me a Mother's Day card. Nothing about this house was pristine. But every inch. Remembered. I stood up and walked to the hallway. Opened the linen closet. Pulled out the old suitcase, green with rusted zippers. Inside I placed the tin. The embroidery. The letters from my mother. Even the photo that had fallen behind the fridge last winter, me and Millie on the porch laughing. I zipped it shut. The suitcase was heavier than I expected. Not from weight. From memory. I carried it back to the bedroom. Slid it under the bed. Not to hide it. To let it rest. Safe. Then I sat on the edge of the bed. Ran my hand across the quilt. Felt the stitching, the softness where the fabric had worn thin. I whispered the names in my head. Ruby. Mirna. Esther. Margaret. Women who baked and stitched and sang lullabies out of tune. Women whose names wouldn't show up in textbooks. Or spreadsheets. But who built families with quiet hands. And carried legacies in tin boxes and folded sheets. I whispered my own name last. Dorothy. Just to hear it spoken. The radio hummed faintly from the other room. A preacher was reading from Psalms. His voice was low and steady. He healeth the broken in heart, and bindeth up their wounds. I closed my eyes. Let the words settle like balm on a bruise I could not name. Outside, a branch tapped against the window. The moon was rising slow, like an old promise. I pulled the blanket over my shoulders and let myself be still, not erased, not discarded, just still. It had been 4 days since Elaine left. No calls. No check-ins. Not even a message to say whether she made it home safe. I sat by the window every afternoon. The glass was cool against my palm. Outside, the trees were bare. Their shadows stretched thin across the grass like bones. The wind moved through them like it was brushing hair I could no longer reach. I did not turn on the radio. Even its static felt too loud. The house had become something else. Not quite empty. Not quite home. I moved through the rooms like a guest. Careful. Quiet. Light footsteps on old floorboards. I avoided mirrors. Not because of how I looked, but because I didn't want to see what was missing. I didn't want to see the space where my name used to feel full, where my presence used to matter. I made soup that day, turnip and barley, the kind that takes time, the kind no one asks for anymore. I peeled the roots slowly, chopped by memory. Each sound the blade hitting the board, the pot bubbling, felt like it echoed too long. I poured a bowl, set it on the table. Then paused. I had placed 2 spoons out of habit. 2 napkins, as if my husband might still walk in. As if Millie might come through the back door cold and hungry. I stared at the table. 2 spoons. 2 empty chairs. I felt my chest tighten. Not from pain, from absence. That quiet ache that builds when no one notices you've left the room. I put 1 spoon away. Saturday down with the other. The first bite was warm, comforting. But it didn't reach me. It stopped halfway. Like warmth, pretending to be love, I chewed slowly. Not because I was savoring, because I didn't know what else to do. I stopped eating halfway through, not because I was full, but because I wasn't sure it mattered. I placed the bowl in the sink. Watched the steam rise. It curled and vanished. Like memory, like names forgotten on a family tree. Like the breath of someone no longer spoken of. I leaned on the counter. Closed my eyes. Listened to the fridge hum. The clock tick. Even time moved around me now. Like I was furniture. Still here, but no longer part of the scene. And I wondered, if no one calls you, no one asks, no one remembers your stories, do you still exist? Do you still count? That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too still. Even the wind had gone quiet. I lay in bed listening for something, anything. A car door. A knock. A voice calling Mom. But there was nothing. Just the soft tick of the old clock in the hallway. I pulled the quilt tighter around me. The fabric smelled like cedar and thyme, like memories pressed between pages. I turned onto my side, stared at the shadows on the wall. They moved gently like ghosts, with no place to go. I wondered what day it was. The calendar on the fridge still showed last month. I hadn't turned the page. No one reminded me. No one noticed. The days began to blur. No Sunday phone call. No Monday list of groceries. No Wednesday baking with Millie. The silence stretched like winter ice, thin, cold, and full of cracks. I thought about calling Elaine, but what would I say? That the soup was too much for one. That the house was too quiet. That I needed to hear my own name aloud just once. I reached for the phone, then stopped. The act itself felt heavy, like lifting a stone soaked in water. Instead, I sat up in bed, swung my feet to the floor. The cold met my soles without apology. I walked to the kitchen, slow and careful. Poured a glass of water. Stared out the window. Moonlight rested on the rose bush. It had dropped its last bloom. Only thorns now. Still, I loved it. Even when it didn't blossom. Even when no one saw its roots. I ran a finger along the rim of the glass. A thought came to me. What happens if I just stop trying? If I stop sending cards, baking cookies, telling stories? Would anyone ask? Would anyone notice the silence that came after mine? I pressed my hand to the window. It was cold. Smooth. Indifferent. I closed my eyes and whispered to the glass. I'm still here. The words fogged the pain for a moment. Then disappeared. Like everything else. I stood there until the chill crept into my bones. Then turned off the light. Went back to bed. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't know what else to do. I lay down. Face to the wall. Back to the world. And thought, if being forgotten feels like this, what would it feel like to reclaim something? Even a small piece. Even just my name. The next morning I opened the cedar chest. The one at the foot of the bed. Inside were the things I had saved. Old report cards from Elaine. My wedding veil yellowed with time. A bundle of recipes in my grandmother's handwriting. I pulled them out gently. As if they might tear just from remembering. I brought the tin to the table. Set it down like an offering. The kitchen was filled with light. Soft, pale. The kind that only shows up after a night of quiet ache. I opened the lid. The scent of paper and spice rose like a forgotten hymn. Each card held more than ingredients. They held women. Women who stirred and folded and hoped. Who measured with their hands and never wrote down exact times. Because they knew. Because they trusted their bones. I smiled just a little. For the first time in days my shoulders softened. I picked one card. Ruby's lemon bread. Do not skip the zest. I remembered her voice. Low, scratchy from cigarettes, but kind. She used to hum while she baked. I closed my eyes and could almost hear it. I reached for a pen. Not a laptop. Not a phone. A pen. And I wrote her name at the top in darker ink. So it would not fade. So no one could erase it again. Then I picked another. And another. Each one I rewrote with care. With full names. Birth years. Where they came from. I wasn't just preserving recipes. I was planting lineage. Not for Elaine. Not for anyone who had forgotten. For the girls who hadn't been born yet. For the children who would one day ask, who baked this? And someone would answer, Dorothy. Or maybe Ruby. Or maybe someone even older. The sun hit the tin just right. It glinted. Like something precious. Like a map. I looked around my kitchen. The same cracked tiles. The same humming fridge. But suddenly, it felt different. Like it was listening. Like it was remembering with me. And I realized, even if no one else wrote my name. I could. That Saturday, Lily knocked on my door. She was 7, lived 2 houses down. Freckles across her nose. Always barefoot. "Hi, Miss Dorothy," she said. "Mom says you make cookies from scratch. Is that true?" I blinked, then smiled. "Yes, honey. It's true." Her eyes widened. "Can I watch?" So I tied on my old apron, the one with the faded sunflowers, and let her crack the eggs. She spilled one. Said sorry too fast. I told her Ruby once dropped 3 in a row. And she still made the best lemon bread in 3 counties, I added. Lily giggled. "Was Ruby your mom?" "No," I said. "She was my aunt. But she taught me how to taste for balance." "What's balance?" "Sweet and sharp. Like lemon and sugar. Like truth and kindness." She nodded like she understood. We stirred slowly. The wooden spoon too big for her hand, but she tried anyway. Flour dusted the air like snow. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and memory. While the cookies baked, I showed her the recipe tin. She ran her finger across the names. "Who's Myrna?" she asked. "A woman who loved spice, cake, and disliked socks." "And Esther?" "She believed every child should learn one poem by heart, even if they never recite it." Lily looked up at me, eyes round. "These are all your family?" I paused. Then said softly, "They are now." She grinned. "Kani atmina?" To the tin. "Yeah. My name. Just in case I ever make a good recipe." I handed her a blank card. Watched her write slowly. Lily Carson. Cinnamon French toast. I placed it behind Ruby's lemon bread. And smiled. It wasn't a family tree. But it had roots. And one new sprout. Later that evening her mom sent me a pie dish. Covered in foil. Still warm. "Thank you," the note said. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about you all day." I set the dish on the counter. Lit a small candle. A new kind of gratitude filled the room. Not loud. Not formal. Just real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt known. The next weekend, 2 more kids came by. Brothers. 7 and 9. They stood at the edge of my porch, shuffling their feet. "Lily said you tell stories," the older one mumbled. "I do," I said. He looked at the younger. Then back at me. "Can we hear one?" I opened the screen door. "Shoes off," I said. "Hands clean." "Mine's open." They grinned. Inside I pulled out the tin again. Let them each choose a recipe card. One picked Esther's apple muffins. The other picked Myrna's spice cake. I read their names out loud. Slowly. With reverence. As if I were reading from scripture. Then I told them about the women behind the recipes. Esther's hands always smelled like cinnamon. Myrna kept a pocket knife in her apron just in case. The boys laughed. Not because it was silly. Because it made these women real. After they left, I sat by the stove. The kitchen smelled like sugar and stories. The kind that linger in wood grain and cotton curtains. I looked around and realized. This wasn't a house anymore. It was becoming something else. A memory keeper. A hearth. That night I wrote on a small card. Root and hearth. Where names are remembered. I pinned it above the pantry. Not as a brand. As a blessing. Each Saturday after that more children came. Some quiet. Some wild. Some with mothers who said they don't have grandparents anymore. I made room, pulled out more chairs, cut apples with small hands beside mine, taught them how to measure by feel, not numbers. We laughed when the dough stuck. We cried once too when one girl asked, "Can I call you Grandma Dorothy just for today?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. One child at a time. The silence lifted. Not all the way, but enough to breathe again, enough to feel like the tree that once rejected me no longer mattered. I had planted something else. Not taller, not louder, but rooted in truth, and watered by names no one else remembered. And that, I thought, that was enough. It started with a notebook, plain cover, spiral bound. I found it in the bottom drawer under old tax forms and rubber bands. I wiped the dust off, open to the first page. Blank. It felt like breath. I picked up a pen. Not to write recipes, but to write names. Ruby Blackwell, born 1912. Margaret Esther Blackwell, born 1890. Dorothy Mae Blackwell, born 1946. I paused. Then added, Lily Carson, born 2017. Joey Martin, born 2015. Nora Wynn, born 2016. No one told me to. No one gave me permission. But I had given enough of myself to silence. Now I would give to remembering. Each name got a page. Each page got a note. A story. A phrase. A smell. A truth. Lily has hands like ruby. Always warm. Joey cracked his first egg with his eyes closed. On purpose. Nora says cinnamon makes her feel brave. I wrote until the light outside turned golden. Then I closed the book gently. Placed it in the cedar chest beside the recipe tin. It was the beginning of something. Not loud. Not grand. But lasting. The next week I drove into town, parked in front of the library. The same building where I once read stories during summer programs. The bricks looked smaller now. The paint more faded, but the memory still rang true. Inside I spoke to the head librarian, told her I wanted to start a Saturday circle. Nothing fancy, I said. Just stories. Recipes. Maybe a pie or two. She blinked, then smiled. We've been needing something like that, she said. We have kids who've never seen a rolling pin. I laughed softly. They will now. I posted the sign-up sheet that afternoon, title in blue ink. Root and Hearth. Memory Circle. Below that, all ages welcome. Bring a name. Bring a question. Leave with something warm. 3 names signed up by sunset. By the end of the week, there were 12. I sat at my kitchen table that night. The radio played low. The candle flickered kindly. And I realized, this was not a plan. This was a seed, and I had finally begun planting it in daylight. The first Saturday came with rain. Not hard, but steady. Enough to make the sidewalks shine. I arrived early. Laid out the tin on the library table. Placed a clean tablecloth. Set a small candle in the center. Not lit. Just there. A quiet symbol. Kids trickled in. Some holding umbrellas too big for them. Some clinging to shy mothers. Lily was first, of course. She brought a small jar of cinnamon and placed it beside the tin. For French toast, she whispered. Then came Joey, Nora, and a boy I hadn't met. They looked around the room like it might disappear. I smiled and said, You're not late. You're exactly on time. We sat in a circle. No desks. No phones. Just stories. I opened the tin slowly. Let each child pick a recipe card. Lily chose Ruby's lemon bread again. Joey picked something new, molasses cookies from a woman named Hattie, who used to hum while stirring. Nora chose a spice cake. She held the card close as if it were a letter from someone she missed. I told them about each woman. Not like a history teacher, but like a granddaughter. Then I asked, "Who in your family makes something special?" Joey said, "My grandpa makes popcorn on the stove." Nora whispered, "My dad makes toast. With extra butter." Lily said, "You do." He blinked. She said it again softly. "You make special things. For us." I nodded. Felt something shift in my chest. Like a window opening from the inside. We spent the next hour drawing pictures of food, writing names on blank cards, tasting cinnamon from Lily's jar. No one wanted to leave. Even the librarian came by and said, "It smells like December in here." I told her December used to smell like nutmeg and warm kitchens. She said, "Maybe now it will again." When the children left, they each took a blank card home. To fill out later, I said, "No rush." One boy said, "I'm gonna ask my mom what her grandma liked to eat." Another said, "I think my aunt made peach pie." But I never asked. I nodded. Ask. Then write. And bring it back. They promised. I believed them. That night I sat at home with the tin in front of me. It felt heavier. Not from paper. From possibility. I lit the candle this time. And whispered, "Let none of them be forgotten." By the third week, we needed more chairs. The circle was growing. Some children brought parents. One mother came with her teenage son. She whispered, "He just lost his grandmother." I nodded and said, "He's welcome here." We passed around fresh muffins. Nora had helped me bake them that morning. She stirred with both hands, tongue between her teeth like Ruby used to do. I brought the notebook this time. Set it beside the recipe tin. Today I told them we write who taught us something. Lily wrote, "Miss Dorothy taught me to stir slow." Joey wrote, "My grandpa taught me that burnt popcorn still tastes good." The teenage boy didn't write at first. Then, slowly he scribbled Grandma Helen. Her hands were always cold, but her hugs were warm. He looked up. His eyes were glassy. I smiled. Didn't press. Just said, "That's beautiful." The notebook was filling. Each page carried more than words. It carried roots. Not perfect lines. Messy ones. Winding, but real. Living. The librarian stopped me after the session. Asked if I wanted to use the space regularly. She said the children asked about the woman with the stories. I told her I wasn't a teacher. She said, "You are now." I laughed quietly, then said yes. That night I walked home slowly. The clouds had cleared. Moonlight rested on my path like a soft hand guiding me. I paused at the gate. The rose bush had one small bud. Out of season. Stubborn. Beautiful. I bent down, touched it gently. Then whispered, "Thank you for coming back." Inside, I placed the notebook on my nightstand. Next to the tin. Next to the photo of Millie still stuck to the fridge. I didn't cry. I just breathed deeper. Longer. Then I opened a new page. Wrote at the top, "Legacy is not a straight line." I stared at it, then underlined it twice. Because I knew. This was no longer about who erased me. It was about what I chose to plant. And who would carry it forward. Not because they had to, but because something in them remembered. Something in them said, "This matters." Elaine called on a Tuesday. Her voice was brisk. "I need your family history papers," she said. "Millie's doing a school project. Something about roots." I stood in the kitchen, staring at the kettle as it whistled. "She's doing the tree again?" I asked. "Yes," Elaine replied. "But this time, they want more details. Immigration records. Old recipes if we have any." I told her you had a box of that stuff. My hand hovered over the burner, turned the flame off. "Let the whistle die," I answered softly. "I do." There was silence. Then, Elaine said, "Could you drop it off sometime this week?" I looked around my kitchen. At the photo still taped to the fridge. At the notebook on the table. At the tin. I said, "You can come by Friday." "Great," she replied. "We'll only have a few minutes before Millie's piano lesson." I didn't reply right away. "Then Friday's fine." When the call ended, I stood for a long while. Hands on the counter. Breathing steady. Not angry. Just ready. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up rewriting the family tree. But not the way they expected. No neat boxes. No clean branches. Just a circle. Names woven together by stories. Ruby, who braided my hair and whispered psalm verses. Margaret, who taught me to mend seams and listen with both ears. My mother, who sang lullabies even when her voice cracked from grief. And me, Dorothy, who had been left off, and then chose to write herself back in. I wrote Millie's name too, and left space beside it. Not for Elaine, but for whoever Millie might choose to remember one day. Then I made copies, printed pages with recipes and photographs. Each woman's name bold and centered. No one would be a footnote. Not this time. I stacked the pages into a binder. Labeled it with a single word, inheritance. And placed it by the front door, waiting. Elaine arrived late. She didn't apologize. Just stepped in, glanced around and said, "We don't have long." Millie followed behind her. Taller now. Hair tied back. Eyes a little guarded. She gave me a polite hug. Not tight. Not warm. But something. I offered tea. Neither accepted. Elaine sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through her phone. "I told the teacher you'd give us some records. Just a few photos and maybe that recipe thing." I handed her the binder. Thick. Tidy. Tied with a thin gold ribbon. She raised an eyebrow. "This much." I nodded. "Roots take space." She chuckled not unkindly. "Let's hope the teacher reads all this." Millie opened the binder gently. First page, a photo of my mother holding me as a baby. Her fingers lingered on the edges. Second page, Ruby standing beside a wood-burning stove. Third, a recipe card scanned and printed. The sugar cookie one, in my handwriting. She paused. "This is yours," she said. "Yes," I replied. She turned another page. Her name appeared in large print, Millie Carson, born 2011. Beneath it, baker of small joys. Learner of balance. Carrier of flame. She looked up. "What does that mean?" I smiled. "It means your hands will remember even when others forget." Elaine leaned over to glance. "Where's the family tree chart?" No chart, I said. Only story. Elaine frowned. Millie needs structure. Boxes. Dates. The teacher. I interrupted her gently. What she needs is names that mean something. Silence. Millie kept reading. Every few pages her fingers stopped. Sometimes at a name. Sometimes at a recipe. Sometimes at a quote written in pencil. Elaine stood. Well, thanks. We'll take this and pull what we need. I didn't move. Didn't offer to pack it. Didn't say keep it. Instead I said, you may borrow it. Millie can return it when she's done learning. Elaine blinked. Seriously. I spent years keeping these women alive, I said. Their stories are not handouts. Elaine opened her mouth, but Millie touched her arm. It's okay, Mom. I get it. And in that moment I think she did. She held the binder with both hands. Like something sacred. Not like a school project. Not anymore. And I watched her carry it out the door. Not with pride. With peace. 2 weeks passed. No calls. No texts. I didn't expect them. I had learned long ago, silence is its own language. But then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Millie. Alone. She stood on the porch holding the binder. I brought it back, she said. I nodded. Did you get what you needed? She hesitated. Then handed me a folded sheet of paper. I opened it slowly. It was a new family tree. Hand-drawn. No boxes. Just names connected by curved lines. At the center in large letters. Dorothy May Blackwell, keeper of fire, preserver of hands. My breath caught. Below it Ruby Margaret Myrna Esther. Then Millie. Lily. Joey. Nora. Children I'd taught. Not by blood. By bread. By story. By care. I looked up. Millie was watching me. I told my teacher this is the kind of tree that feeds people, she said. Not the kind that just hangs on a wall. My throat tightened. I stepped back, opened the door. She came in. We sat at the table. No tea. No small talk. Just presence. She placed a small tin in front of me, decorated with a drawing of a lemon and a cinnamon stick. Inside her own recipe cards, written in her handwriting. I'm making one for each person I want to remember, she said. Like you did. I touched the tin lid. It was warm from her hands. No ribbon. No title, just real. Like her. We spent an hour reading names together. Not to study. To witness. To honor. Before she left, she hugged me again. This time longer. And whispered, thank you for giving me back the women. I nodded. Whispered back, they never left. She walked down the path with steady steps. No rush. No retreat. And as the door closed behind her I turned to the window. The rose bush had bloomed again. 3 flowers. Bright. Unapologetic. I looked at the tin. At the new tree. At the seat Millie had just left. And I knew. I hadn't just been remembered. I had been rooted. Right where I was meant to grow. Spring came slow that year. The snow melted in patches. Like the land was remembering itself one corner at a time. I opened the windows. Let the air move through the house like a new thought. The floors creaked a little less. Even the silence felt different, not hollow. Just resting. I started keeping the tin out on the counter. No more drawers. No more hiding. Each Saturday a child still came. Not always the same ones. But always someone. They brought names on slips of paper. Recipes scribbled in crayons. Photos of grandmothers with firm jaws and tired eyes. We pasted them into the notebook. No rules. No approval needed. Just names and care. Some days, the circle was small. Just 2 chairs. Other times we ran out of space. But we never ran out of room. Room for roots. Room for remembering. Millie came once a month. Sometimes, with a new recipe. Sometimes with nothing but a story. And that was enough. One time she brought a friend. A quiet boy named Theo who had lost his grandfather the week before. He didn't speak for most of the afternoon. But when I handed him a card and said, "You can write anything you remember," he wrote. His hand smelled like paint and peanuts. He called me champ even when I spilled things. I pasted it into the book, right next to my husband's page. Later that evening, I sat in my rocker, the one with the cushion Millie sewed herself. The house was warm, the light gold. I looked around at everything that had once felt too quiet, too forgotten. Now it breathed, alive. Full. There was no plaque outside. No website. No legacy fund. Just a kitchen. A notebook. A girl who said thank you. A boy who said champ. And a woman who had once been left off the tree. Now seated at the root. Still. Steady. Sane. The last Saturday of spring was quiet. No one knocked. No one called. But that was all right. The house did not need noise to feel full. I baked lemon bread. The kind Ruby taught me. Measured by cent, not spoon. I sliced it warm and left it on a plate near the window. Let the breeze carry it outward. An offering to the air. To memory. To whatever spirit still wandered through old recipes and pencil notes. Then I walked to the garden. The rose bush was wild now. Branches reaching further than before. Not neat, but strong. I knelt beside it careful with my knees. Planted 3 new seedlings. Labeled them with wooden sticks. Esther. Myrna. Theo's grandpa. Names the world might forget. But not this dirt. Not this home. Inside, I opened the notebook. Turned to a blank page. Wrote 1 line. A name remembered becomes a root. Then closed the book gently. Set it beside the tin. Lit a candle, even though the sun was still out. Some things deserve ceremony, even if no one is watching. I sat in the rocker with a small cup of tea, hands wrapped around it like prayer. And I thought, this wasn't the legacy I once imagined. It wasn't a mention in a family tree, or a seat at someone else's table. It was this. A girl learning to stir slow. A boy writing down the smell of his grandfather's coat. A teenager calling cinnamon sacred. And a woman who never raised her voice, but was finally heard. Outside wind rustled the lilacs. The sky held that soft late daylight. Everything moved gently, like it understood. Like it had been waiting. I closed my eyes. Took a breath, and said her name. Then mine. Then one more just to be sure the world didn't forget. Not this time. The late sunlight touched the tin box beside me, and for a moment, it looked golden. I've learned that legacy isn't passed through loud names or neat charts. Sometimes it's a smell of lemon bread, a child's scribbled card, a name whispered out loud just once more. What quiet legacy do you hope to leave behind? We'd love to read your story in the comments below. You are not alone. Your journey matters. Subscribe to Grandma Radio, where every story is a second chance.